What's up everybody, Matt Maran here for another car review. This is of course the 2019 Hyundai Veloster Turbo. Huge thanks to Hyundai for flying me all the way out here to Austin, Texas to drive the brand new 2019 Veloster for you guys today. So about the 2019 Veloster, well, like I said, all new now. It's a little bit longer, but very similar dimensions to the old one, but it's been completely reworked from the ground up. Obviously the sunset orange color looks really nice. Right up front there, you have the signature Hyundai grille now that looks really good in this application. You also have these very cool looking headlamps up front, and in the front bumper it's a little more aggressive now with those aero curtains, and the whole look from every angle was really a little more sleek, I think, than the last version, which was a little more bubbly, I guess, in its appearance. While this still looks very unique and different, I think that it's just a little less crazy looking than the last one, which I personally like. And then coming down to the sides here on this R-Spec one here that we have currently, we have these 18-inch wheels that have Michelin Pilot Sport 4s on them, which is really cool to have here on a vehicle of this price tag. And then going down to the sides, that's one of the most unique things about the Veloster is on the driver's side here, you have a normal like a two-door setup, there's just one door there on the driver's side, and on the passenger side there's the asymmetric setup, so you have a normal size passenger door and then a hidden third door there as well to help people get in and out of the back seat a lot easier. And so a really cool thing that, I mean, no one else does that. The Veloster is the only vehicle on the market with that feature, and I think it's actually kind of ingenious and very cool. Going out back there, it still has the very squat rear end like you've seen on prior Velosters, but this one just, again, looks a little more streamlined, a little less bubbly, and looks a little meaner. I think they kind of flared out the fenders here a little bit, both front and in the rear, to give it more of a hunkered down stance than before. And I really like those new taillights as well with the angles within them. I think it's a really cool look. I also like how they kind of nicely hid the trunk release there in the glass, so that he has a nice clean deck lid panel there, and then you also have a little rear diffuser, and the center exhaust tips are really cool as well. And so overall, I think it's a really cool looking little car. As for the interior of the 2019 Veloster Turbo, well, it's a pretty cool place to be. I apologize first for the air conditioning being on a little bit higher. It's 92 degrees currently, so there's no way I can do this interior talking part without baking unless I have this AC cranked up. So anyway, first things first, sitting down in these seats, you have the very cool cloth seats here in the R-Spec. Now, if you go up to the higher trim levels, you can get leather or partial leather, and these cloth seats, though, are really nice. They almost have like a t-shirt almost type of material here for the bottom portion that feels pretty good, and then you have some rougher cloth up here on the sides, but overall, they're pretty comfortable seats. They have really good torso support. Thigh support is also pretty good, although not quite as tight as I think the torso support is, but overall, they're pretty comfortable seats, and I do like the yellow accents you have on them here. They're also manual adjust here in the R-Spec. There isn't any kind of power or any kind of heating for them either. That also comes with the higher up trims. Next, the steering wheel here in the Veloster Turbo, which is a really great steering wheel. It's nicely leather wrapped, has a great 9-3 grip, nice little 10-2 notches, a nice little yellow accent here going down the middle of it, and just a couple of buttons here on it. It's pretty straightforward with the way everything's set up here, and so overall I think it's a pretty great looking and great feeling steering wheel. Next, the gauges here in the Veloster Turbo, which are also really nice and attractive. I like that it's a little bit more different than what you see in like the Elantra Sport and things like that. But still very. I just like the sporty fonts you have, and it's your basic analog gauges. Then you have a little digital portion there in the middle that doesn't really have a lot of colors or anything, but also just has your trip information, a few of the settings for driver assist tech and stuff like that. Nothing too advanced. You don't have any audio stuff in there or navigation or anything. But just the basics, and so overall, pretty good but simple gauge cluster. Coming over to the center of the dashboard here, right up top, you have the great 8-inch infotainment display here that Hyundai has. It has Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, and it's a really great unit. It doesn't have a ton of features in this one, and the R-Spec doesn't have navigation either. You can go up to the higher trims for that if you need it, but of course, with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, you don't really need it anyway. And it's very easy. Thankfully, you have a volume and tune knob, so changing radio stations and all that is very easy to do. And you have just a couple other little menus for settings and things like that. And so overall, pretty simple, but really well done. Coming down, like I mentioned, you have the volume and tune knobs and a few other shortcut buttons here in the middle, and then you have your climate controls, which are manual here in the R-Spec, but again, you can go to auto climate and the higher trims. And anyway, it works well. And all the knobs have a nice little resistance to them, so they do feel pretty high quality. And then right beneath them, you have your power outlet and 2 USB jacks and an auxiliary jack, which is great to have all those hookups right up front there. And then right beneath that, you have a nice large storage pocket here, which is really wide and goes really far back there. And if you go to the higher trim levels, you also get a Qi wireless charging pad in here, which is nice. Other things as far as storage, you have a nice large map pocket here in the door, which also has a bottle holder in it, which is great to see. Coming over to the center here, you have 2 standard size cup holders, and then you have the center armrest, which has this rubberized material on it. It does have a little bit of give, but isn't super soft, but is okay. And anyway, you open that up, and then you have a pretty large deep cubby in there. No additional hookups or anything like that, but just a nice wide space, and so really great for storing, you know, all your little knickknacks you need to store. And so overall, you know, for a sporty vehicle like this, it's got a really good amount of storage space. Backseat space in the Veloster Turbo is actually really good, and they actually improved it a lot over the previous generation, even though the car didn't get really much bigger. So whenever you hop into that backseat, I'm 5'9", me sitting behind myself, I easily have about 2 to 3 inches of legroom to spare there, which again, I mean, I guess you couldn't really technically call this a coupe. It's kind of in this in-between thing, but you know, for a vehicle of this size, a really good amount of rear leg space there. Good amount of headroom as well, you know, not a ton, because you do have that fast back kind of roof line to it, but I still do have about 1 inch or 2 of headroom to spare. So you know, you could easily fit someone, you know, 6 feet tall, I think, back there, because you have the leg room to spare. They can kind of slouch down a little bit and be fine. And you also have 2 cup holders and a little storage bin there in the back for them as well. And so overall, a very usable and a really good sized back seat. Trunk space in the Veloster Turbo is also really good and better than you might expect. So, you know, it's just a really deep and wide opening there, and you know, it's really a good amount of space. And they actually said, I think it's actually more than a lot of the small compact crossovers. One last little thing about the interior I gotta mention though is the plastics in here. So, you know, this is a very affordable car. You know, starts right around just under $23,000 here in the turbo trim. So really, you know, good amount of value. But the interior is where you pay the price of that a little bit. I mean, like I said, you do have a leather wrapped steering wheel, but for example, the e-brake cover is not leather wrapped, and all the, you know, all the plastics on the doors and stuff are pretty hard and feel pretty cheap. You know, everything around the center area outside of the buttons that you actually touch, which I mean are parts of plastic you don't really touch on a regular basis, so not a huge deal, but all of that is all very hard plastic, and it looks like that as well. So not ideal there, but again, like I'm saying, for the price of the vehicle, I mean, I think a few of the competitors do have you know, a relatively similar price and feel a little bit nicer inside. So I think, you know, the Hyundai's not going to come out on top as far as interior materials quality, as far as the feeling and everything of that. But still, yeah, like I said, it's all the parts that matter. You know, the seats feel great, steering wheel feels great, infotainment's great, all type of stuff. Those important things are all very good. All right, so start up and go for a drive. The Veloster Turbo here has this really nice Hyundai key. It actually has metal on the ends of it here, and some nice glossy black buttons on the back. And yeah, so it has a really nice weight to it, a really high quality key. So anyway, it's of course keyless entry and push button start here on the Turbo and up models. So you just leave the key in your pocket, hit the engine start button, and it starts right up. All right, so setting off in the 2019 Hyundai Veloster Turbo. So first thing you notice is the visibility as we're pulling out of a bumpy parking lot here. Pretty good visibility, you know, nice large windshield for the most part. Great view out of the sides, very long side windows here. And view out of the back is also quite good with a nice, pretty good opening. You know, you would think with this little bit of a racy roofline that it, you know, wouldn't have great visibility, but it actually is better than you would expect. And so overall, it's a very easy car to drive. But I put it into sport mode here, and so let's turn down onto this back road and see how it does. Here we go. Alright, got a little bit of wheel spin, traction control lighten up, but it really does a good job putting the power down. So we have still the 1.6 liter turbocharged 4-cylinder engine that still does about 201 horsepower and 195 pound-feet of torque, which is really close to, you know, the old Veloster Turbo, but they did completely retune the engine, so now the torque comes on sooner and stronger, and it has a little bit of an overboost function, I think, as well, so it'll actually be able to go a little bit beyond that torque figure every once in a while. But we're on some windy roads here. I did get to drive this a little bit earlier on some even tighter windy roads, and really the biggest thing that's impressive about this is these Michelin Pilot Sport 4s. The fact that they're on a car in the low $20,000 range is really impressive, and that makes all the difference here. And those are, they only come on the manual transmission versions. Now if you really want those tires on an automatic, a dealer could help you out with that, but the automatics come with Nexen all-season tires. So these summer tires are only on the manual transmission versions of both the R-Spec, or you can go for the regular Veloster Turbo Ultimate, you know, the higher, you know, more luxurious one. That can still be having the manual aero as well, and that will also get these awesome tires. But because of that, I mean, they're 225 wide, you know, Michelins, and they just have so much grip, and that's what helps with putting the power down. That's what helps with the great handling. I mean, obviously the lightweight also really helps with the great handling. These only weigh, depending on how you configure them, you know, and the options and stuff, right around 2,900 pounds or just slightly under. And so, you know, it feels just that light. And you know, of course, with the turbo, they also have unique tuning for everything. So that has an independent rear suspension. All Velosters for 2019 now have an independent rear suspension. Not just even the turbos, even the base model has that suspension. And so because of that, I mean, it really feels good. You know, in handling, it feels really good. Ride quality is also much more improved over the old Veloster. That's one thing that I think is even more noticeable, is just how smoother the ride is than it was before. I mean, the old Veloster, you know, was a little bit on the rougher side. It wasn't horrible or anything. They were totally daily drivable. But this now just really takes it up a level to, you know, a higher level of refinement. And it also helps, like I said, with the handling, which now feels much better. It just feels so planted and secure, and you know, like, it's just, you can really do a lot. And I mean, you know, obviously it's a front-wheel drive vehicle, but I don't really feel much understeer either. You know, I mean, it wasn't really getting tail heavy or anything on, you know, on the other side, but it was definitely, just felt nicely buttoned down, you know. And I'm sure if you push it harder, you go to an autocross course, you will find some type of understeer. But even on really tight, you know, back road corners that I was on earlier, it still is really, really good handling. You know, right up there with what you see from, of course, any other thing like the you know, Elantra Sport, and also, you know, stuff like even the Civic Si. I think this actually feels a little bit lighter and more compact than that. I think those actually weigh a little bit more as well, not by much. You know, they're all pretty close, but I think this is a little bit lighter. And as far as, you know, the lightness of the Veloster, it actually did lose about 30 pounds, I think, here for the turbo. Do another acceleration. That time it wanted to light up the tires a little more. It feels pretty strong. You know, it doesn't help. It's now 95 degrees here, so not great turbo weather. So that is another thing that I think, you know, if you were driving this a little bit of a cooler climate, it'd feel a bit better. 95 is pretty punishing on any car, and probably not likely to produce, you know, the fastest accelerations. But it definitely does feel very sporty. Another thing here, while we're sitting in a red light, the manual transmission here is really cool. Now, it's a B&M shifter in the R spec, and so that really gives it nice, firm, precise shifts. And it just feels really good. You know, there's just short shifts, and everything just feels very sporty about this transmission. And it's very easy, you know, very well-defined gates and everything, so it's very easy to, you know, use and learn. You know, I've never missed a gear or anything like that. The clutch is also pretty easy. It does have a very short throw, so I mean, it grabs, you know, as soon as you start letting off the clutch, really. So you definitely have to be a little bit delicate with your clutch. It takes a little getting used to, but once you get used to it, you know, after a little bit of driving, it's very easy and not bad at all. And so overall, you know, the manual transmission here with these tires and stuff, it is a really fun package, and I really like, you know, that they're serious about it. You know, they put serious tires on it. They give it a serious, you know, really good feeling shifter. You know, like I said, it feels a little punchier with the torque and stuff. And earlier this morning, when it was a little bit cooler, it was easier to feel that torque, and it really has a nice strong mid-range that, again, feels very similar to what you see in a lot of the other competitors that have also gone turbo these days. And it has that same punchy feel as all those, and its small shape just makes it so tossable too. It just really feels like a fun little toy you can just toss around, you know. And it takes it, and it loves, you know, being driven hard like that, because, you know, again, you don't have a ton of power, so you do got to bring it out a little bit. Although, you know, like I said, you do have torque and stuff, but you know, to get the most out of it, you still are going to want to take it a red line and really, you know, go full throttle in order to, you know, get the quickest and most exciting acceleration. But it definitely puts down the power so much better than the Velosters in the past. It delivers that power in a more refined way. You have a more refined ride. They've just really nicely polished everything up about the Veloster Turbo experience. It's not wildly different, you know, it's still very much the same as the Veloster of old, you know, as far as, you know, it's not that much faster or anything like that, but it still does certainly feel better. And yeah, it's a really fun little package. Also, for those that are curious, 0 to 60 time for these hasn't been quoted officially by Hyundai, but you know, it's probably somewhere in the 6-second range. Again, still kind of hard to judge considering it's a 95-degree day, but you know, I would say that's about right. You know, maybe on the higher end of the 6-second spectrum, but still, you know, very strong performance, and should be right in line with, again, the same kind of straight line performance as you had on the previous gen Veloster, maybe a little bit better. One last thing I want to comment on, though, in regards to the Veloster Turbo with the manual, but this is also is applicable to the automatic, is it has this engine sound enhancement thing, and so it gives you a lot more intake noise. And now some of that is natural, but some of it is piped in through the speakers. But the good news is you can turn it off completely if you want. So I love Hyundai. I think is one of the first to give you the option of whether or not you actually want this stuff, and without having to do any kind of aftermarket hack, you can just turn it off within the infotainment system here. And there's even a lower volume mode if you want, and then when you put it in sport mode, it also gets louder, but you can, again, you know, have it louder or quieter depending on what you want, or turn it off completely if you don't want any false sounds. But I think it sounds really good. It actually kind of almost has like a traditional old school 4-cylinder sound, like something that would have a cold air intake, you know, from the tuner days. It's kind of how it feels and sounds to me. Just to give you a little comparison, so this is with you know, sport mode and the sound enhancement on. Nice amount of sound. Then we'll go up here to setup, vehicle, and then we'll turn it off completely. And now, so you still get some of that. It's still a very true sound. You just don't get as much of it. Then we go back to enhanced. It really just feels like it just turns the volume up, basically, you know. So this isn't like it's piping in some type of V8 sound or something that isn't characteristic to the car. You know, it still is more of the same car's same natural sounds, just a little more volume. And to me, I really like that. I think, you know, the more sound, the better. I enjoy, you know, additional sound. It livens up the experience. But if you don't want it, thankfully they've given you the choice, which is really cool of them to do that. But yeah, so let's go hop in the dual clutch automatic in the Ultimate and see how that drives. All right, so now we're in the DCT automatic version. So this is the 7-speed automatic here. We're now in the Ultimate trim as well. So we have these nice leather seats, which I do think are a little bit softer and more comfortable than the cloth in the R-Spec. And this one is a lot more expensive too. So, you know, the R-Spec starts right under $23,000, and this one here in the Ultimate trim is a little over $28,000. So pretty big jump. And you know, the interior does look a little nicer here with these leather seats, and the two-toning here on the interior plastics, but it's still, you know, once you're getting up close to $30,000, this interior is a little bit more of a sore point for me, I think. You know, even at the 22.5, I think there's a few other competitors that might be a little bit nicer, but especially once you get into this price range, you know, I mean, you do get a lot of other nicer equipment. You know, you get the heated seats, you get this moonroof, the two-tone with the black roof is also really cool, and you know, you get a little heads-up display, which is just a little screen that comes up. It's not actually projected onto the windshield, which those type of heads-up displays I'm not a huge fan of personally. I just feel like I'm wearing a pair of bifocals or something every time I am using one of those. Mazda also has one that's similar. But as we're going around some corners here, this is where I honestly immediately notice the little bit of a, I guess, squirmier ride you have here. And a little bit of a lack of grip, but you can see it was wanting to push a little bit, but it held its line, and so that's really where this little lightweight comes in handy with these. But yeah, it's just these tires, you can tell they give up a lot quicker. I'm used to the R-Spec having those Michelins that gripped in corners at that speed of that tightness, and this, it just, you know, starts giving up a lot quicker. So next in all seasons are what you get here in the automatic versions. Obviously, it's not hard to swap tires, so it shouldn't be a deal breaker. Although the Michelins aren't cheap tires, you know, I think they're around $200 each in this size. But yeah, it's definitely apparent, I think. And I wish they would have given, you know, just an option, you know, from the factory to upgrade, because even I've noticed there's a little bit more wheel spin off the line too, I think, with these tires. And again, even if they would have done like maybe a Michelin all season, I'd be a little bit happier, because these Nexans just don't seem to be quite as sporty. But this automatic here, so you know, there's still the different driving modes, you know, with sport, and then there's also a smart smart mode now for the automatic. But anyway, the 7-speed dual clutch, I've noticed whenever you're starting out from a stop, it still has a little bit of that dual clutch like engagement feeling. It's pretty smoothed out, but it's something that, you know, it's not perfect still. It's not as good as a torque converter, but you do get some pretty quick shifts. So we're in manual mode here now. And the only thing that is, you can tell, like the tachometer will jump whenever you downshift, but it doesn't fully like engage the clutch until a split second later. And now upshifts are pretty quick. I mean, they're almost immediate. Sometimes it's quicker than others. It's not totally consistent so far in my experience here, but it is pretty quick. And I would say it's better than some of the normal torque converter automatics, not as good as some others. That's kind of middle of the road, I think. And so, you know, I go back to, if you're a hardcore enthusiast that really loves shifting manually, just go for the actual manual transmission still. It's a very easy manual, you know, it's not a heavy clutch or anything, so sitting in traffic isn't going to be quite as burdensome as it might be in something with a heavier clutch. So, I mean, I would still stick to that. This automatic's great, though, if you do sit in really, you know, long amounts of traffic, or you don't want a manual for whatever reason, then I think this automatic is still okay. But I definitely think the manual is the enthusiast choice here. But it still is, I like that they have paddle shifters and sport modes and all that type of stuff to, you know, give you a sportier experience. And I mean, you know, upshifts are pretty solid, I have to say. You know, it's not really slow. It's just sometimes you can catch the downshifts a little off guard. But even those are doing pretty well here. You can hear those little lags whenever I'm downshifting, though. That's kind of what I noticed. There's also a little bit more torque steer here. I got a little bit there just getting on it with the wheels turned. But it's doing a pretty good job. I don't want to knock it too much. And like I said, tires are an easy fix. But another thing that is actually pretty good here is the fuel economy in the turbo version. It's actually right in line with what you get from the non-turbo version. So these are rated at 28 in the city and 34 on the highway for the automatic. If you go for the manual, then I think it's like 26, 33 or 32. It's pretty close, but still, I mean, honestly, even in my little drive route here, I've been averaging, right now my current average is 27 mpg, and there was a decent amount of kind of highway cruising, but now I'm getting on it and, you know, redlining it and stuff like that, and it's still returning pretty good. And on the drive route earlier this morning, I actually averaged about 30, and again, a decent amount of highway in that, but it was a good mix, and I think that's right in line with what you get for a combined rating for these, is, you know, right around 30 mpg. So it does that, and that's pretty, you know, pretty good fuel economy. Again, it also helps since it's lighter and a nice small little engine, but you know, still good to know that you can, you know, beat on one of these things and still get some respectable fuel economy still. One other little thing I want to mention real quick is the throttle response is pretty responsive here, you know, especially whenever you're in sport mode. It sharpens that up, and the steering weight gets nicely sharpened up. But the brakes definitely have a lot of travel, and they don't have a lot of bite right at the top of the pedal, and they seem to kind of vary their pressure off and on, and so it's a little interesting. Not the most precise brake pedal, but you know, it gets the job done. The brakes are larger than when you get on a regular Veloster. But yeah, overall, I mean, the Veloster is a very fun vehicle. Whether you have the automatic or the manual, it still is an absolute blast. And you know, it's just great for these little tight corners like we have here. It just eats it up and just yeah, definitely missing those Michelins. That's the only thing. A little bit of wheel spin there, but it's got good pull too. You know, it really does feel nice and punchy here. And for some reason, I think it feels a little quicker with the automatic than the manual. Obviously, you don't have to worry about waiting for shifts with the manual. So as far as 0 to 60s go, this should be a little quicker as well. But just the feeling of it, I think it's because there's 7 gears here in the automatic versus 6 in the manual. I think the gears are a little tighter in their spacing on the automatic, obviously because of that. And so I think it just makes it feel a little bit more energetic, I think. Just splitting hairs. I mean, they both feel pretty strong, but I just get the sense that this kind of has a little more urgency to it in its gearing than the other one. And it actually, in this spec, it actually feels every bit of that 200 horsepower, maybe even a little bit stronger than that, honestly. So overall, yeah, these new Velosters are really fun, and I think it's a huge improvement in every way over the previous generation. So it's a great upgrade for those that love the Veloster already, and a really cool, you know, new offering for those that are looking for something that's fun, front-wheel drive, that has a little more practicality than your standard coupe would, but still has the very, you know, eye-catching looks and great performance. So anyway, huge thanks once again to Hyundai for providing me with this opportunity to review the new Veloster for you guys today. Let me know your thoughts about the new Veloster in the comments below. Thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Take care.